All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Kabbalah Coffee. This is Sunday, June 28th, and it is truly a pleasure to be here with you this morning. So there's a lot to talk about. Hopefully you're going to appreciate today's class, learn a lot, and be inspired. The goal of this series, which is, I'll show you the Hebrew. It's called Hechotzu Ranat. The goal of this series, in English we're calling it Learning How to Love, is to learn how to get along better with others. It's a very simple goal. You know, it's so simple. Simple is not easy, by the way. There's two things. There's simple, there's easy. Simple is not necessarily easy. Easy is not necessarily simple. These are things that we were told, these are things that we learned, these are things that we tried to develop when we were young, when we were kids, learning how to get along with others. And when we were really young, we were maybe like 3 or 4 years old or 5 years old. So, our parents told us to get along with this one, to get along with that one, to be their friend, to be nice. And either we listened or we didn't listen, but I'll tell you this. The basics don't change. The basic calling of a human being doesn't change, and that is to be nice to someone else, to respect them, to love them, to care about them, to not try to hurt them or take advantage of them. These are such fundamental ideas to being a human being, and yet we struggle. We struggle with this throughout our lives. We as individuals struggle with it. Society struggle with it. We create systems, hierarchies, class systems, racial systems in which, unfortunately, as we've seen throughout history, one group harms another group, is prejudiced against another group. Even if it's not formal, it could be informal. And the goal is to tear down the walls of separation, the barriers that separate between us. Of course, the premise of this is the instruction from the Torah in Leviticus, the instruction that says, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your fellow as yourself. That is the verse in the Torah that instructs us to love. In the Talmud, it's reversed. This mitzvah is reversed. Famous story of the fellow who wanted to convert to Judaism. And he went to the great sage Shammai. And he went to Shammai and he said, please convert me on condition that you teach me the entire Torah, the entire belief system on one foot. What happens? Shammai says, I cannot teach you Torah on one foot. That's ridiculous. That's it. You're out. Don't bother me. And he dismissed him. And then the same individual went over to Hillel, who was a contemporary of Shammai, and he says to Hillel, please convert me on condition, but I want you to teach me the Torah on one foot. So Hillel says, no problem. What is hateful to you, don't do unto others. This is the entire Torah, the rest is commentary. Now, then he said, now go and learn. A lot of times that last part is dropped off of this narrative, but that's also a very important piece. He tells him, Ma dasanei alach, what's hateful to you, what you don't like, do not do to your fellow. Do not do to someone else. This is the entire Torah, v'idach pirushi. The rest of it is commentary. Now go and learn. So Hillel reframes your fellow as yourself. Hillel says, gives the flip side, the other side of the coin. Don't do what's hateful unto yourself, unto others. What is hateful to you, don't do unto others. So between these two statements, one from the Torah, one from the Talmud, we have what we call the golden rule. At least within Judaism, that's what we call the golden rule. And both sides of the coin. Number one, do something loving, do something kind and generous for someone else. Number one, love your fellow as yourself. Number two, respect the person enough that you don't do something to them that you wouldn't want done to yourself. And these are two necessary pieces or parts of it. As I've said many times in many classes, based on Kabbalah, it's not enough to love, you also have to have respect. Because if you don't respect the other person, your love is worthless. You can love them but hurt them. Why? Because you don't have the boundaries that respect gives you. So love induces action. Respect induces inaction. Because I love, I'm going to do. Because I respect, I would never do that. And you need that also. Because if you don't have that, a person can quickly violate boundaries that they should not violate. So I love you, I will do for you. I respect you, I won't do. I'll respect you. Love and respect are necessary ingredients in human relationships on whatever level they're at. Family, friends, it doesn't matter. Love and respect are necessary ingredients. Our world today is in desperate need of both of these pieces. We need to fulfill the commandment from Leviticus, love your fellow as yourself, and also fulfill it the way Hillel imagined it to this individual who was inquiring about Judaism. And by the way, the end of the story is he converted to Judaism. He loved the message. Shammai chased him away. Shammai said, on one foot, the whole Torah, get out of here. Okay, Shammai was a little bit more strict like that. He didn't have time for what he perceived to be, fooling around. But Hillel always approached with love. But it's interesting, Hillel's statement from a place of love was, don't do unto others what you don't want done to yourself. And that gives us the respect piece. As I've said many times, again, love equals sameness, respect equals difference. When a person when someone tells you what they're thinking, and you say, I love that, you know what it means? It means you agree with them. When somebody tells you their opinion and you say, I can respect that, you know what that means? You don't agree with their opinion, but you can respect it. So love means sameness. Respect, love is an outgrowth of similarity. Respect comes from difference. And so here's the question. Can you and I not only love the other, finding similarities, but can you and I respect the other, notwithstanding the differences that exist between us? Can you and I authentically respect the distinctions between each other, not become judgmental, not become hateful, God forbid, not become dismissive based on difference? Can we truly love the other, notwithstanding difference? Can we respect them notwithstanding difference? In fact, can we respect them precisely because of their difference? That's the goal. That's what we're doing here Sunday mornings. I was about to say every Sunday morning, but last week was an exception. I would say out of 52 a year, I think we're pushing a solid 40, 45. The goal with these classes is to keep on going, rain or shine. No matter what, Corona, not Corona, in person, online, it doesn't matter. Unless there's a major holiday like Yom Kippur or whatever, Rosh Hashanah. But the goal in this series, in these sessions, is to inspire us all to love the other and respect the other. I'm telling you the mission statement of these classes just so you know. Because it's nice to hear ideas, but it's even nicer to know why we're learning these ideas. We're not learning Kabbalah 101 in a vacuum, or 201 or 301 or whatever it is. It's not Kabbalah in the abstract. The goal here is applied mystical Jewish mysticism, applied Jewish mysticism. Kabbalah that is specifically designed to drive us, inspire us, lay the groundwork for us to authentically love and respect the other person. Not the person that you already love and respect, but the one that you don't, for whatever reason. If perhaps there's someone you don't love or respect currently, the goal is to move the needle on that. So today's topic is about darkness. This is a very powerful theme in Kabbalah. In fact, one of the indications of how powerful this is when you look at the account, at the story of creation, as told in the beginning of the Torah in the book of Genesis, and you read every day, 6 days of creation. Of course, the seventh day God rested, Shabbat. But if you look at all 6 days of creation as the narrative goes, the Torah uses the same chorus line, the same refrain, and that is Vayehi Erev, Vayehi Boker, Yom Echad, Yom Sheni, Yom Shlishi, which means, let me give you the English, and it was evening, and it was morning, day 1, or day 2, or day 3, or day 4, or day 5, or day 6, etc. So every day of the 6 days of creation are defined as, what is the unit of a day? Vayehi Erev, Vayehi Boker. It was evening and it was morning. Which, of course, as you probably know, is the origin of the Jewish day starting at night. A curious phenomenon for the rest of the world. But in Judaism, the day begins at night. What do I mean? Yeah, I know that in our society, 12:01 marks a new day. I know that. But I don't know if anybody really considers that to be the beginning of a new day until the morning. But in Judaism, already at sunset begins the next day, which is why, when does Shabbat begin? Not Saturday morning, but Friday night at sundown, sunset. Right? The sun sets on Friday evening. Welcome Shabbat. Shalom Aleichem Malachei Yashareis. We welcome Shabbat. Friday evening. Why? Vayehi Erev, Vayehi Boker. Because the unit of a day is defined by Torah as evening and then morning. So the day begins at night. I know it's weird, but listen. That's why Jewish time is so wonky. But anyway, evening and then morning. That's the unit of the day. Of course, it's not just a technicality, and it's not just a Jewish way of being. It's a powerful mystical concept. And that is, if you want to get to the light, you're going to have to go through the darkness. If you want to get to that burst of light of the morning, if you want to get to the boker, to the morning light, to that burst of energy, you're going to have to go through the Erev. You're going to have to go through the evening first, because darkness always precedes, but more than precedes. Darkness always precipitates the light. So there are many different ways to understand this concept, even within Kabbalah. I want to share a few with you. First of all, on a very basic level, the Kabbalists explain that what the Torah is doing is telling us really our calling in life. Our calling in life is to move from those dark spaces, from the spaces of challenge, from the spaces of quiet or not so quiet despair, from the places of spiritual concealment from the darkness into the space of light, to never get intimidated by the fact that the world doesn't look the way that we want it to look, the fact that that human beings don't always act the way we'd like them or us or ourselves to act. To not get intimidated by that, to not get despondent from that, to not get depressed by that, but rather to keep on fighting until we produce the morning light. But again, there are multiple levels in this regard. Let's discuss a few. Number one, there's a statement in Kabbalah that says, Yisron ha'ar ba min ha'choshech, which means the abundance of light, or the great light, always follows the darkness. Yisron ha'ar, the greater light, ba min ha'choshech, comes from the darkness. Which means it's not just that light follows darkness as we see by nature, right? We have the night and then we have the morning, so the light follows the darkness. Not only that, but Yisron ha'ar, a greater light, follows the darkness. And even within this, there are multiple ways of understanding it. Number one I would say is the contrast idea. And that is that the light that follows the darkness seems that much brighter by contrast. Because you're coming from a space of darkness, because you're coming from a space of not having or not seeing, or that place of lacking, spiritual lacking, when you finally achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve, it's that much sweeter, that much brighter. So to give you an example, there's a refrain in Kabbalah that says, I think the expression in Aramaic goes like this: Shraga b'tia ramayahani, which means a candle during the daytime is of what use? It's a rhetorical question. Like, of what benefit is holding a candle in the midday sun, when up to the midday sun? So imagine you're outside and it's a bright day, and then you light your candle, even more than a candle. Let's say you light even a Havdalah candle with a bunch of different wicks, multiple wicks. You hold that outside. How much brighter did you just make the world? Right? How much brighter did your environment become? Probably not that much. Why? Because it's already much brighter than this candle. But take the same candle and go into a space that has no light whatsoever. Bring it into a room that is engulfed in darkness. Bring it into a space that is pitch black. And what happens then? Now you can see. Not only can you see, now the candle has a purpose. And now the candle's light is that much sweeter. So a basic understanding of the Kabbalistic statement of Yisron ha'ar ba min ha'choshech, that the greater light comes from the darkness, means that you only notice the light sometimes in those dark spaces. Because if it was a bright space, you wouldn't even notice the light, because it was light anyway. So the only time you notice the light is when it's coming in contrast to the dark spaces. I'll give you an example. Kabbalah asks the question, the big question, one of the big questions. Why are we here? Right? Why did God send a soul, a neshama, a soul, a piece of God? Why did God send this spiritual light, spiritual energy down into this lowly, dark world? A place where godliness doesn't shine openly. A place where the Creator is not always apparent. A place where people can live their lives in absolute denial and defiance of their source. So why did God send a soul down into this space? There are many answers that are given. One simple answer is for the soul to light up this very space. So God creates a space of darkness, spiritual darkness, right? A space where truth and reality, if you want to call it the real matrix, is not visible to the naked eye. And God says to the soul, go down there, and over there in that dark space, I want you to shine. Because frankly, Mr. or Mrs. Soul, up here in heaven, you don't really have much of a day job because it's already bright, right? What are you adding to this space that the space currently doesn't have? The soul exists in the spiritual realms, Atzilut, Bria, Yetzira, various spiritual worlds. But on the level of those worlds, what does the soul add? It's already a bright environment, spiritually bright environment. So what does the soul truly and really add? Not much, one could argue. Therefore, according to this explanation, God sends the soul down into this space, a space devoid of spiritual light. When I say spiritual light, let me be very clear. Of course, this world is filled with God and godliness. Yes, it goes without saying. But it's not apparent to the naked eye. It's not obvious. You have to meditate on it. You have to study about it. You have to perceive it. You have to look into it. You have to peel away the layers from it to discover the light. So of course there's light here. But it's not obviously light. The most obvious state of this reality, the one that we inhabit, is a state of darkness, spiritual darkness, where we don't see the truth, we don't see the Creator, we don't see purpose. We spend most of our days running after things that are secondary to our primary existence. We spend quantitatively more hours a day focused on satisfying our biological and existential needs than our higher spiritual purpose. It's not even close. Most of our day is spent quantitatively, numbers of hours. Most of our day is spent pursuing money, food, other hobbies, activities, pleasures, rest, etc. How many hours a day do we dedicate to the things that are truly eternal and purposeful? I don't mean indirectly, I mean directly. Right? How many hours a day do we focus on our primary purpose of being? Or what's truly important in life? Right? Our loved ones, our faith, God, our connection, our soul, our purpose in life. And yes, trust me, I know that when we go to work, we're doing it to support our families, etc. I get it. But that's already, it's a bit of a twist, right? It's like we're doing this for that. How many hours a day do we directly address the ikar, the main thing in life? Who is it? I think it was Stephen Covey who said, the main thing is to make the main thing the main thing. Yeah. How often do we make the main thing the main thing? Do we make the secondary things the main thing? So that's why I'm saying this world in Kabbalah is called a place of choshech, a place of darkness. This world is a space where it's so hard to focus on purpose. And so often we get carried away by the trivial, the unimportant, the secondary. So, God sends a soul into this world, and the intention is, the goal is, the mission is, light it up. Make it a brighter space. Transform the darkness into light. And when you bring light into a dark space, now the light's going to be noticed. Up in heaven, Mr. or Mrs. Soul, you're not adding much to the ambiance, right? It's already pretty bright. But when you go down to planet Earth, when you inhabit a body with all of its challenges, now you can make a difference. Now your impact can be discerned. Now your light will be noticed. So that's one basic understanding of the statement, Yisron ha'ar ba min hachoshech, that the greater light comes from the darkness. It's the contrast of that light against that backdrop of darkness that makes the light truly shine. Because otherwise the light would just get lost. It's like what everyone says. You only appreciate the blessings in life when you got the opposite. Right? When you're going through a hard time, God forbid, then you start appreciating the everyday blessings that you have. You had it before, you didn't see it. You took it for granted. It was all fun and games. It was all nice. Against the backdrop of challenge, now this becomes a moment of beauty, a moment of, an area to enjoy, to be happy about. So it's the contrast that brings out the light. Many people say that's one of the gifts of death. Right? Death allows us to appreciate life. If we didn't have death, would we appreciate life? Or we would just take it for granted. Yeah, of course this is the state of being. What else is there? But it's against the backdrop of the opposite, of that lack of life, the cessation of life, that life begins to emerge as the blessing it truly is. So from this way of understanding, it's not that the light that emerges from darkness is a brighter light, necessarily, but it's that its brightness looks brighter in contrast to the backdrop that is made of the opposite stuff. Does that make sense, what I just said? So this understanding of Yisro and Ha'arba min HaChoshech is not that the light itself is greater when it comes from darkness. No. Same light. Right? The same candle I held out at high noon outside in the park that didn't do anything is the same candle I can hold inside my dark house when the lights go out, and it's going to be very, very valued and treasured. It's going to make a difference. So it's not a brighter light. It just makes a greater impact when seen against the contrast. That's one understanding. That's not the real understanding. I mean, all of everything that I said now is true, but that's not the depth of this Kabbalistic statement. The true meaning of Yisro and Ha'ar Ba Min HaChoshech, that the greater light comes from the darkness, means that the light that is born from the space of darkness is a greater light than could have been born had there not been darkness prior. In other words, the energy born of challenge, the breakthrough born of challenge, is qualitatively greater breakthrough than the breakthrough that could have ever emerged without that contrast, without that challenge. Sure, you've heard of the expression, necessity is the mother of invention. That means from a place of darkness, from the place of need, emerges something brand new that could not have been birthed if not for that darkness. Understood in a more personal sense, what it means is that it's the challenges in our own lives that bring us to a greater breakthrough than we could have ever achieved on our own had everything been calm and happy. We don't ask for challenges in life. Let me be very clear here. We don't go around and asking for challenges. In fact, in our prayers, we say, in the morning prayers, we ask God, don't bring me to challenge. Don't put a test in front of me. Don't make it hard or difficult for me. We ask God for the easy and open blessings, not the ones that we have to figure out what they mean. That's what we ask for. But in life, we don't always get what we ask for. That we know also, right? Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is not exactly. So we ask for what we ask for, but it doesn't always play out that way. And when we have that challenge, Kabbalah says this is now the time to discover the purpose of the challenge. Because if you and I understand the challenge to be some sort of cosmic mistake or cosmic punishment, then we're missing the depth and the truth of this moment and of this opportunity. You see, the moment of darkness is intended, from a Kabbalistic perspective, to exist for one single purpose and only for this purpose. And that is to unleash a greater light than could have ever been unleashed had this challenge not been present. We look at the world today, and we look at the challenges in the world today. I'm moving it now from a microcosmic level to a macrocosmic level, from the miniature universe of the human being to the larger universe of the world we live in. And we see I don't know if it's unprecedented, but we see big challenges in society. And the only question on our mind should be, what is the breakthrough that we are going to create because of this? We cannot let this opportunity just come and go. What is the breakthrough that can happen because of this moment? Tremendously challenging. But what is the breakthrough that we can achieve? If we're not getting the breakthrough, we're not doing it right. In Kabbalah, Choshech is actually higher than Ar. Darkness actually emanates from a higher dimension of godliness than light itself. Because it's within the darkness that the truly infinite light lies. A light that's so strong, you can't even see it. It appears as darkness. I'll give you a simple example. If you shine a small light in front of your eyes, what do you see? If you are unmuted, I'm sure you would all chime in together and say, the light. If you shine a really bright light in front of your eyes, what do you see? Nothing. The brighter the light, the more infinite the light, the darker it looks. That's the formula. Take a candle. Light a candle on fire. Or light a candle. Light the wick. Right? What happens? Different grades of color. You know what? Let's make this interactive. Why not? Give me a second. Okay, this is my Havdalah candle, and I guess I have to work quickly so that the wax doesn't drip on my laptop, because that's probably not a great idea. So we're going to move quickly here. Take a look. Take a look at the fire. The closer the fire is to the wick, right? The fire is hotter at the bottom, and it gets less hot at the top. Look at the colors. The closer it is to the source of the fire, the darker it is. It's almost black, and then it's purple, and then it's blue, and then it's orange and yellow. Those are the hues of the light. And in Kabbalah, got a full-blown fire here, folks. Let me put this out. By the way, there's a Jewish tradition not to blow out. If you're wondering why I'm using a plate, like has this guy never blown out a candle? This is a teaching moment also. There's a Jewish tradition not to blow out a candle with your mouth. Because a candle represents, the flame represents the soul. Ner havaya nishmat adam. It says the soul of man, the soul of a human being is the flame, is the candle of God. So therefore, we don't want to blow it out. because it's like we're extinguishing, metaphorically, a soul. So we do it with a plate. I don't know why that's any better, or we do it with our hand to wave it out. So we don't do it actively, we do it in a more passive way. You're still allowed to put out fire, but do it in a less direct way. Okay, back to the point. Kabbalah talks about the different hues of the flame, and how it's interesting that the darker the flame, the hotter it is. Which means that white light that we like to think about is not actually the highest level of light. It's not the strongest part of fire. It's the dark light, if you will. That's the hottest. That's the highest. Which is why in our prayers we say something fascinating. Again, the morning prayers. Right after the Yishtabach prayer, which is a prayer of God's praise, right in the middle of the morning service. It's kind of smack in the middle. 15 expressions of divine praise. Right after that prayer, Yishtabach, we move into the blessings preceding the Shema. Of course, the Shema prayer, one of the most famous Jewish prayers, taken from Deuteronomy. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. It speaks of monotheism and other fun themes. So, but preceding, you don't just jump straight into the Shema, there are certain blessings before. Right after the Yishtabach, we say a prayer. And we say a blessing. We're blessing God. And we bless God for the following. Yotzer Ar, God creates. We bless God for forming light, uvore choshech, and creating darkness. We bless God and we thank God for the formation of light and the creation of darkness. If you are familiar at all with the Kabbalistic worlds, the worlds of Kabbalah, you know that top down, Atzilut, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya, emanation, creation, formation, action. We live in the world of action. But above us is formation, and above that is creation. Look what it says. Yotzer Ar, God formed the light, but borei choshech, but created the darkness. Which means that darkness comes from the world of Bria, which is higher than the light, which comes from the world of Yetzirah. The darkness comes from the world of creation, darkness comes from the world of creation, whereas the light only comes from the world of formation. Darkness is higher than light. Darkness precedes the light. Why? Not just because it's something we have to get rid of in order to get the darkness, but it's the darkness itself that evokes the most incredible light. It's the challenges of life that evoke the greatest possibilities. If not for those challenges, we could never have those possibilities. The light would never be born in such a powerful way had there not been that degree of darkness. That's a truth in life. And that's the deeper meaning of the Kabbalistic statement of Yisron Ha'ar Ba Min HaChoshech, that an abundance of light, or the greatest light, comes from the darkness. Not just you didn't notice it until you had the contrast. That's like a basic level of understanding. The real understanding is the greatest light comes from the darkness. And it's not the light that comes after the darkness, but it's the light that's born inside that darkness. It's not that you have to move away from the darkness and then you move to the place of light. You're not going to get that greater light that way. You're going to get the contrast light. That's the first dimension that I spoke about. You're not going to get the second level light. The second level light is the light that's inside the darkness itself. It's the light of the energy. It's that blinding light that's so bright that all you see is the darkness. That's the light we're talking of. So we know this. If we're ever facing a challenge in our lives, there are multiple ways that we can look at it. We can look at it as a mistake, as a punishment. God's out to get us. We can look at it many, many different ways. We can look at it as an opportunity to move past and get to a better place, or we can work really hard to find the light inside this space. There's no one that can tell you about the light that's inside those dark spaces. This is a very personal exploration and conversation. Because if anybody tells you about the light in your dark spaces, that constitutes a lack of empathy. If somebody tells you, oh, don't be broken up about this thing, look at the bright side, you know what that means? They're exhibiting a lack of empathy. And first and foremost, we are called upon to empathize with the other. So this message is not for you about someone else. This is not about me telling you anything. This is directly a message to you. Not from me, but to you and to myself. When we are going through challenge, we have a choice. We can look at it as disconnected. We can look at it as a mistake. We can look at it as cruel. We can look at it as a punishment. We can look at it through any sort of negative lens. Then we can look at it as a stepping stone or a temporary glitch or a blip on the way to something better. Or something that will make us appreciate the good times even more. But then there's the way that Kabbalah tells us to really look at it, or encourages us to discover this for ourselves. And that is, can I find the light, the blinding light, inside my own dark spaces? Inside my own challenges, my own difficulties. Can I find that darkness? But one thing is certain, from a Kabbalistic perspective, there's always light inside that space. It's not my job to tell you what that is. It's not your job to tell anybody else what that is. This is only an idea, a teaching that we can apply on our own to ourselves. Us knowing what that is, what our challenges are, what our difficulties are, what our darkness is made up of. It's only we who can then discover the true light that shines within that space, which would constitute its true purpose. This, of course, connects with a fundamental Kabbalistic idea, which is the highest sparks fall to the lowest of spaces. So it's precisely in those spaces that seem to be completely dark, completely disconnected, that the greatest potential lies. So at this time, we all have to ask ourselves the question, what is the light? What is the light that's inside this space? And how am I going to find it and unleash it for myself and for the world? And everyone's going to have a different conversation and a different exploration. But it's something that we have to have on an ongoing basis, especially in a time when there's a larger upheaval. Right? The question is, what light will I find in this space? I mentioned a few weeks ago that in the process of creativity, in the creative process, when it comes to bringing something into the world, there's very often this notion, thread, and explore it through the lens that I introduced up until now in this session, and of course continue the conversation and explore it even further. So the word tzimtzum is a very popular Kabbalistic term. When I say popular, what I mean is it's very often found in Kabbalistic teachings. What does tzimtzum mean? It means essentially, it's usually literally translated as contraction. But what it also means is a darkening of the light. classic example that we've given many times, even a few weeks ago. A teacher that is teaching a student, and the teacher has all of this wisdom, all of these ideas that he or she wants to share. However, the teacher also knows that if they would drop all of this wisdom on the student, it would be overwhelming, to say the least. Confusing. It would be perhaps negative. It would create a negative reaction within the student. Why negative? Because when you're hit with too much information, or when it's too deep, so not only do you not get it, not only does it go over your head, but it also might confuse you. Right? You ever heard something, you ever heard an idea, and instead of understanding it, you didn't understand it, it didn't even go over your head, it just made you more confused than before? You ever had that experience? Yeah. Hopefully not this class. I'm just saying, hopefully. Because if that's happening here, that's not my intention. Right? So the goal, of course, in education is to communicate something in a way that the student or the recipient can receive it. There's no mitzvah to give that which cannot be received. That's not called giving, that's called imposing, or breaking, or confusing, or whatever it is, but that's not giving. True giving implies giving in a way that can be received. So, again, another example that I like to give is, if you go to a restaurant and you order a glass of wine, and the waiter comes over and pours the wine, you expect that at some point before the top of the glass, they're going to stop pouring. Because if they keep on pouring, what's going to happen? It's going to overflow. And if they keep on pouring when it overflows, it's going to make a mess. And then things are going to get ruined, including the table, the food, and also maybe your clothing. And that's not a good thing. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that's probably not a good thing. Which means that when you give, you have to respect the boundaries of the recipient. In the language of Kabbalah, the light, which in this case means that which is being transmitted, the light needs to be tailored, needs to fit with the keli, or with the vessel of the recipient, the kli hamakabel, the vessels of the recipient. So if you are transmitting something to someone else, and you want them to receive it and to internalize it, it has to be according to their capacity of receptivity. If you're giving them something that's beyond their capacity to receive, they're not going to receive it. And then what'd you do? You didn't do anything. If the whole purpose here was to give, you didn't give, so you wasted everyone's time. And maybe even you harmed in the process. Going back to an example that I gave before. Light is good. Too much light? Now I'm going the other way on this. Right? I said before that too much light is the greatest light. Okay, but for the eye, it could hurt the eye. Which means that the greatest, that there's a certain point where a good thing becomes too much of a good thing and can actually harm if it doesn't fit inside the vessels, so to speak, the receiving capacity of the recipient. Not only does it not go inside, is it not contained, does it not benefit, it could actually harm. And I know I'm using the same example in two different ways. It's not so different, but don't worry about that. I hope that's not confusing. Because again, I don't want to be meta here and be confusing. Okay. So when it comes to teaching, for example, you want to teach in a way that is understandable. Comprehend, in a way that you can comprehend. That's